disappeared, renovated, and now it's back here where it belongs. Almost.
Well, Liverpool used to be a seaman's town now. It's full of seamen, dock roads. You have 7 miles of docks. Every person knew was a seaman and went away to sea. All the old bars and pubs. It's go away. You go away up to 18 months on a tramp steam. Till you get back. You wouldn't recognise the place, know what it used to be. It's all gone as we used to know it.
Yeah. But the memories remain. That's important. As long as you've got your memories.
The river was full of ships. The Blue Funnel, Clan Line, Elder Dempster, Cunard at Pierhead, still going to North America, Alaman boats. You'd see 5 or 6 ships when you were crossing from the one side of the river to the other.
Well, this was our morning constitution. We used to walk around the deck, great hordes of us, just taking in the air before we had to work in our offices and viewing all the new ships on the river.
In the early 60s, I used to ride down from Oxon on a bicycle and bring it across on the ferry. The ferries were bigger then, 2 stories with an open top deck. And that's when you got the businessmen walking around anti-clockwise in the bowler hats, brollies, very distinguished. And they wouldn't let you walk in the other direction. You had to behave. They wouldn't throw you overboard, but they certainly nudge you to one side in a friendly, gentlemanly way.
Of course, you always had the odd soul who liked to walk in an opposite direction, which caused havoc, of course. But and people would be going tut 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 and making rude comments about people who wouldn't conform and things.
Originally, my first attempt was in the mid-70s. Me and my son, we got a book from the library, penguin books with kites, and we made this kite up, and it wasn't very successful, so I gave up. And then with the days the computer came, and I went online there, and there was all kinds of websites to make the kites and all the rigs, to tell you what to do. And I started off in the 90s then, doing all that. Yeah. When we used to go into town, we used to go into the clubs or the pubs, and this used to be a bus depot and a tram depot. And we used to end up here getting the last bus home, and there was a little kiosk where you used to get steak and kidney pies, and we all used to go down there for a steak and kidney pie and get the last bus home. I think it was the 82C, I think. And then after that all changed, the bus depots disappeared. Then they built a big green area here, all grassed area, and that was there for years. And obviously they've changed it again now with the canal.
This area here, this rectangle here where the Hilton stands now, was the place where the old customs house used to be. And this is where when we were children, well kids, 12, 13, we'd come and we climb over the walls and we play in it. We call it the dungeons. And behind it at the back was the sailors' home. And opposite here there used to be the overhead railway that run the length of the dock road from the Dingle to Seaford.
Containerisation just burst overnight, and everybody knew, except the senior management, everyone knew the world has changed. That was it. We had no idea that it was going to be so drastic, but containerisation was introduced about 1962. By 1972, break cargo and general cargo was largely finished, largely over. The world we're talking about finished in 1972. A little bit dragged on after that, but the huge numbers of ships, one container ship would take, in those days, a moderately sized container ship of say 60,000 tons would do the work of 5 conventional ships. In fact, the ships that I sailed on, you could have put on the deck of one of those container ships, and the modern container ships are at least twice as big again. So they're doing the work of 10, 12 ships. We would get 3 and 4 and 5 days in port. We might get 2 weeks leave in between ships. Not now. The ships don't even break watches. They're only in port for about 6 hours and then they're on the way again. The crews don't get ashore. They get long leaves, but they get no time ashore overseas. And that was the whole thing. We went all over the world and somebody paid us to do it. It was great.
This is the Lisbon, and it's on Stanley Street in Liverpool in the year 2011. And this store here that's shut now, I don't remember it being a restaurant because I was a barmaid here, but I know this entrance into the Lisbon was used loads, and that's where I would come in. Generally, the people who came in here for a drink, loads of businessmen, but not loads of suit and tie businessmen, more like, you know, workers, physical workers, maybe people who sold fruit and veg off a barrow in Victoria Street, because then you'd have barrows. It was big. It was more like fruit and veg merchants, that all these buildings. You got a lot of sailors. They usually came down later on, say about 9 or 10 at night, in their uniform and everything. And if there was anyone gay in here, you'd see them going over to them and making conversation and buying each other drinks, and it was like whatever was going on was their own and it was personal. But it was really friendly in here. I got the odd one who was a bit racist, but it didn't bother me because I felt quite comfy and at home in here. Apart from the sailors who were from other countries who'd come here, you had all different nationalities. So you'd get, you know, half a dozen, 10 at a time that would come in here, which I was made up to see because I was really aware of there being very little black presence in Liverpool city centre. Even though I lived over the water, I'd come over to Liverpool because they have all the clothes shops and everything like that. Woolworths was big at that time, and Blacklers. And not seeing very many black people in the city centre, I was aware of how many came in here and that they were from abroad.
This is the Queen's Dock, and I was from the North End, and I sailed mainly on North End ships, but I wanted a bit of a change, and so I came down. I got a job on McAndrews. I was a galley boy, I think, or looking after the sailors or something. It was still very, very young. And we brought this cargo back this time, and the dockers were always sort of getting crates or getting demi-johns or staving it to one side for a drink for later. The dockers started to load not a whole consignment, but probably about half a dozen, but quite good pianos. One of the dockers lifted the lid and started to fiddle around, started to play it. Soon there's a crowd around this guy, and he's getting into the swing then, and then somebody starts singing, and then the next thing you know, some of the dockers have brought down wine, and they're opening these demijohns, these great big sorts of casks of wine, and starting to drink, and I was just sort of, it got broken up after about an hour. But that hour, I was just a young kid, and I was just on the after end, the back end of the ship, just looking down and just thinking, this is great, this is great. This is the middle of the 1960s, this is Liverpool, people having a sing-song, people having a drink, and I think it was like something like a Tuesday afternoon.
In here, we're Gordon Rimmer, who was the main instrument maker and compass maker, and his brother, Ron Rimmer. It was very, very important, you know. All these gauges, the instruments to test them were massive. Oil, steel to test to make sure they had the right pressure. And the reason they had they always had the workshop high up was to get the sunlight, so they had plenty of clear views of when they were repairing the instruments, like the clocks, the azimuth mirrors. We go back to the compasses, boat compasses, all types of things that were done. But the reason to be up there was because of they could get more light. If they were on the ground, they couldn't get the light. But there they could get the lights. The big windows, the small windows.
Now we are really deep in crew territory. This is crew territory. Over there where that glass building is now, that was the pool. 25,000. It was the Sailors' Labour Exchange. 25,000 of men were signing on and off there. Now, Liverpool was not a tramp port, it was a liner port. That is cargo liners, which were 2 and 3 month voyages. So you were home regularly, so at least between a fifth and a quarter people would be here at any one time. So there'd be 5,000 or 6,000 seamen here at any one time. And they would go into the mission, which was directly opposite the pool, and the old hands would sit in there because the pool clerks would man the unpopular ships. The greenhorns would go over, they'd find out what ships were going through, and then they'd come back and we'd question them and find out what ships, because they would always save the best ships to the last. And when you got into the pool, you'd become adept at reading upside down, because you would read what the clerk's ledger, what ships he had listed, and you'd say, oh, I want the Blue Star boat, I'll take the Blue Star, because there was loads of overtime in them, loads of overtime.
I worked here for, 5-6 years of my life, as a youngster. As you can imagine, in its heyday, this was absolutely, it was one of the busiest places in the town centre, because we had people coming from the northwest of England, from Liverpool itself, from North Wales, because this was the central place where they could get their fresh fruit and their fresh vegetables. This was like there were generations worked down here, there were families of people who worked here, and it lost that sense of oneness and that sense of belonging because it was in the city centre and people could almost identify with the square. That's what we used to call it, the square. Moving up to Edge Lane, it lost that feel. It was clinical. They were brand new units, and I didn't last long after that. I left there in 1970. I haven't been here from 1964, and 1970 I moved on after that.
and I did something different. Well, I always remember Queen's Square being a hive of activity. There's always things going on all the time. The produce merchants and the lorries, the carts and so on and so forth. And it was just a hub of activity, which when it disappeared, the whole area became dead.
Up there was, mostly still is, the commercial quarter. So, you know, still a black work there. So everybody sort of used to come down here to go to the cavern. But these were all warehouses. See, Temple Court I worked. And ours was this where all this red is now. That was Dan Wheels. My office was up on the first floor. So like now I can't particularly remember wagons, although they must have been here to get their stuff in somehow. Again, it might have been through a back entrance, but this was all open. This is where all the fruit and veg was, on the ground floor here. And then obviously, as I say, just round the corner to the cavern, having a good time.
This building used to be a banana warehouse. It was originally built about 1810, and the fruit market used to be here in Matthew Street. And the bananas used to hang off hooks at about 15-inch centres in both directions. There's big timber beams under the floor here on all the floor levels. And when I came, there were all these hooks that were rusting away. I could knock them all off.
I'd walk down, come along Fenwick Street or Castle Street, walk down that way, and that used to be all South Castle Street right the way down there. But as you can see now, there's the courts running around, so South Castle Street, yeah, South Castle Street would be there. And the place where I worked, the banana warehouse, was basically underneath the courts now. Underneath the courts now, yeah. I got this job just after I left school, and my dad got me here. It was in a banana warehouse. Don't have them now, you know. You say to your kids now, or your grandkids, you know, I worked in a banana warehouse, and they haven't got a clue what it was. I went there, I was there a couple of years, and I ended up being a banana cutter and packer. It's unbelievable, honest. And there were air raid shelters. I think there was five air raid shelters that got converted to banana rooms. We used to get the bananas off the canary boats down the South One Kings. We used to come up here on a wagon, send them down the conveyor belt. We'd lift them up, hook them on, cut all the paper off and straw off, and leave them for about 4 or 5 days. Then we used to put gas in it to make them go yellow quicker. And then when done that, we used to cut them and pack them in 28-pound boxes of wooden boxes, which you don't see now, you know.
It was absolutely buzzing, Park Lane, because they used to come from all over. I think this was the place to be. Scandinavians, Chinese, West Indians, Africans. You mention it and they were there. Just go to Park Lane and you see them. That's what made it so interesting. You know, it was just, you know, one big showbiz, really. Because they, you know, you could have the antics of them. They used to walk up and down playing guitars and singing and things like that. Mainly, it was on a Saturday night because that to me was the fun night for me. And the kids would have the wash, the bath and the supper and into bed. And I couldn't get out quick enough to sit on the veranda to watch the big show that used to go on. And there'd be all the gay girls, as I used to call them, coming down here. Go to Park Lane, that's where they all are. There used to be Rosie's Bar where they used to go, and Harry Shaw's. They were the two noted pubs. You go in there sober with sixpence and come out drunk. And then sometimes you'd hear squabbles going on. And especially it was mainly I used to notice with the Scandinavians, because I think they used to get, you know, pickpockets going around, and you'd hear them shouting about the money was gone, had been stolen, the money had been stolen, and shouting, police, police. But then they'd be back again the next night, you know. And I used to sit at me veranda saying, oh, they must like it.
This is where the company was that I worked for. It was Foxwell Palmer Limited, and we supplied, made, repaired and tested lifting and rigging equipment for the ships. And we employed blacksmiths and welders and riggers and all different trades. And it was quite a reasonable sized outfit, and always very, very busy doing all the ship repair work. And on the opposite side of the road was Guinness Exports, where they processed the Guinness. There weren't many pubs around this immediate vicinity, other than, say, the Baltic Fleet down there. There was one or two cafes, shops, you know, news agents, that kind of thing, and a lot of the other businesses were associated with the shipping industry. One or two ships chandlers, you know, selling everything that you'd want on a ship, you know, buckets and tools and all sorts of things, and very, very busy, yeah.
Pink's, which is where I worked here, it was a wholesale jewellers called Charles Pink and Company, and that had been established by my boss, whose name was Arnold. It had been established by his father Charles, and it was quite a derelict building when I worked there. And when I let you in the door, because I was sat right by the door, I had this little corner with a shelf, which was my desk, and next to that was my filing cabinet. And then going further into the shop was where we had all the showcases and things. But when I asked him why he never did anything with the shop, he said, well, we never get broken into. He said, because nobody thinks we've got anything in here. So, you know, his reasoning was right, but it wasn't good for us who work there. Over there where Goldsmiths is, maybe a little bit more towards us here, was a little newsagent's shop, and that was owned and run by a man called Frank, and that was where I used to get my Mersey beat, and he used to keep it for me every fortnight. So on my way to work, on every fortnight, I'd go in, get my Mersey beat and come into work with it, yeah. But the best thing in this street was on the corner we had Cooper's, which was like probably Liverpool's one and only deli at that time, and the smell of fresh coffee and everything when you went in there was absolutely fantastic, and they had like a cafe and everything there.
I could hear screaming and shouting and all kinds of things. We had the window open at the end of this corridor, and then we heard the fire bells, so I made my way down here to the front of the building to see what was going on. And it was then that I realised that Henderson's, the store, was on fire. So I dashed to this window, and the window in those days wasn't secured, so I was able to lift it up and view everything that was going on. So there was all hell let loose. One of the things about the store then, Henderson's, was it had a balcony right the way round, and of course as people got trapped on the top roof, there was no way they were going to get down, because in those days we didn't have the hydraulic lifts that we've got these days on the fire engines. But they were trying to get people out of the windows at this level. But the people on the top floor were then, the smoke was billowing out of the top of the building, and several people jumped off the top and smashed themselves on the balcony round the bottom. It was pretty horrific, and it certainly wasn't something that you would want to watch. I mean, it was fascinating, but it was really horrible. And to watch a lovely building and
Well, they were our clients. I mean, I loved going in there for my morning coffee and a Chelsea bun or something. And of course, I had a lot of friends with the staff in there, so it was really a horrible experience, which you know, has lasted a lifetime. I can still see the people who jumped off the roof, well, at least they built another building in the place. So.
The Royal House, as we remember it, was the floating fish and chip shop, which was all painted yellow at the time, and it was like a party, but it was like a floating nightclub at Lighthouse. Everybody used to enjoy a trip on it. And also in the 50s and 60s, we had the St Tudno, the St Trillo, and the St Serial. Leaving Liverpool, you used to go to Llandudno, Bangor, and Brew Morris, and come back in. And that was like a great day out for all the Liverpool people. Besides the team, everybody used to go on it during the summer. While I was, say, in 1950, 56, 57, I was on the Hector Whaling Company, the ship called the Ballina. Used to go out down to the Falkland Islands, South Georgia, whale factory ship. We used to bring all the whale oil back to Bromborough Dock, discharge all that for Lever Brothers, and then go to the Gladstone Dock. We used to rip all the decks out of it because they're all full of whale oil, refurbish it, and then wait for the next season and go back to the South Georgia.
And when the whaler was in the Gladstone, all the ladies of comfort left the American base up at Burton Wood and came down to the Caradoc. And the Yanks up at Burton Wood thought the end of the world had come. There was nowhere. And the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds had to go around feeding the birds up in Warrington when the whalers were in.
The pub outside the Gladstone, the Caradoc, was the only pub in Liverpool that had an American dollar till in it. They used that much money, took that much money from the American seamen, so they all used to drink in the Caradoc or the Winifred pub. So it was quite unusual for the rest of Liverpool to go in a pub and see a dollar till on the counter, you know.
Obviously the lock gates, these new lock gates, they were wooden gates, bit dilapidated. There was a bridge structure going across here. I don't know how that operated, but it swung, I think it must have swung round or retracted, I don't know. And everything was silted up inside. It was just open to the tide. My interest at the time was photography. I used to do my own black and white photography. And I'd mainly do my photography on the north end. I had a pass from the Mersey Docks and Harbour Board to allow me onto the dock estate to take photographs. And used to travel by bike because you could travel all around, easy access. And a couple of times I'd wander right down from Gladstone right through down to here.
The proposal in the late 60s and 70s was to demolish the Albert Dock and build a large, what they called Aquarius City, a series of towers, not unlike the ones they're planning north of, well, they built north of Pier Head. And the council was very keen on getting development in Liverpool. The point was there were other sites where they could build them. There's plenty of empty sites and other places to build. But the Albert Dock was very run down, derelict, and rather a sad place, really. It had lost its purpose. But it had great potential for the Polytechnic because the Polytechnic needed sites because education was increasing. Not the whole of the Poly would have come here, just parts of it. But we also advocated the Maritime Museum, which did eventually happen, and shops, and even a Jessie Hartley pub. I've got a lovely drawing of a Jessie Hartley pub I propose in the far corner there.
This is the camera I used in the mid-1970s when I filmed Williamson Square, and it's a Pathoscope Webo camera reflex 9.5mm, and it holds 100-foot spools of film, lasts about 4 minutes. And I filmed Williamson Square over a period of time. I gave the impression it all happened in one day, but of course it didn't. And but I really wanted to film the various activities that took place here. And as I look around now, quite a few changes have taken place since the mid-1970s. I remember the fruit stall was down in the corner of Williamson Street there, and I also remember the man selling the jumping beans, which used to be various parts of the square. And of course you get Matt's hot dogs being wheeled by, and of course that sort of thing couldn't happen today because for hygiene reasons, I would think, but it also very, very, very popular. The band would be playing in the centre here. Punch and Judy would be roughly where I'm standing now on one side of the playhouse. By my shoulder here would have been the escalator down which the children were sliding, and tucked away under that was a room, lockable room, where the band kept their instruments, because there were regular players on this square, the Merseyside Transport Band, as it was called in those days. And I think before that it was the Liverpool City Corporation Transport Band.
Beautiful, really, really very nice. Never met a mermaid with two tails. It was literally just here in a triangular site with sloping bits, Jacobean detail, and quite an individual building. And internally there were cast iron details with the same mermaids on the balconies. It's a great shame it went. I mean, now it would be preserved, but then it wouldn't. If you're going to build a shopping centre, you can't make buildings that part of a shopping centre. It would have been very hard pressed to make it into a viable building. The real problem with old buildings is finding a good use for them.
People see more of the docks now than they've ever seen, because right up until the 1970s, the docks, well indeed the 1990s, the docks were completely an enclosed estate. So that it's only since they've been opened out, the Albert Dock, since what was it, the mid-80s. But what you would see, why Canning Place was such a great sort of spot was the walls were relatively low, so as you could sort of actually see the ships from the street. And what you've got to remember is that this was a crowded place. This, in some respects, was the sort of start of the heartland of the southern docks. If you just follow down from Paradise Street, past Cleveland Square, onto Wapping and the heat mill there, and then you get onto those small cluster of what were the southern docks, the Dukes, the Kings, the Queens, all the way up to Harrington and all the way up to Harrington and the Brunswick dock, which is a business park now. So many things have changed, but here in the city centre, they've certainly changed radically, and probably for the better.
Very well, my brothers, mind they say, real mercy, fare thee well. For I'm bound for California, to a place I know. So fare thee well, so fare thee well, my own true love. And when I return united we will be. It's not the leaving, it's not the leaving of Liverpool that grieves me, but my darling, when I think of thee. Oh, we're bound for California, by true love. And when I return, united we will be. It's not believing of Liverpool that grieves me, but my darling, when I think of thee.
You don't realise till things have gone that you should have taken photographs of the area. And you should be doing it now, because 50 years time things will be changed again.
I really miss it. I really miss the people. You know, they're so friendly.
It's looking up now, Liverpool, like, because when I was a kid it was a nice place, and it's still a nice place.
To see the demise of your city going down, particularly through the 70s and the 80s, I never ever thought that, you know, we'd come back from that, but as true to form, you know, Scousers are like the phoenix, you know, rising from the ashes. But yet there's those sort of mixed emotions there, you know, sadness but gladness to see what we've got here today in 2011.
Never mind the world, man. Great turnout, great turnout.